We all love a good mystery. It's the reason why detective shows are so popular on television or in the movies. You don't have to be a detective to find a good mystery, though. You'll find plenty in the world around you. Our whole planet is covered in strange abandoned places that somehow don't look right when you first see them. We've gathered several of them together in this video for you, and we're here to tell you their stories. You might expect that when production has been shut down on a major movie, the crew members involved in the making of that movie would tidy up after themselves by packing down their sets and taking them away. Apparently, that isn't the case, not even for a film franchise as big as Star Wars. Science fiction fans will probably be delighted to know that there are relics of the Star Wars movies all over the desert of Tunisia, so you may want to consider the country as a potential vacation destination. Most of the sets were used to represent the alien world of Tatooine. Some CGI was used to dress Tatooine up in the movies, but for the main part, all of the structures you see on the screen are still here. That includes the majority of the sets that were used in scenes that took place in the city of Mos Espa. Desertification is a constant threat to all of the buildings, which routinely end up half buried under sand after storms happen in the region. But officials in Tunisia perform routine maintenance on them because they've become a strong source of tourism income for the economy. The city of Asago in Japan's Hyogo prefecture is hiding a spectacular ruined castle in its mountains. The castle is properly known as Takeda Castle, but locals prefer to refer to it by the more mystical and enchanting name, the Floating Castle in the Sky. If you're familiar with the site of Machu Picchu in Peru, you can consider Takeda Castle to be the Japanese equivalent. It's so high in the mountains that it's frequently surrounded by fog, and if you visit it at the right time of day, you get a sense of what it might feel like to sit on a cloud. Access isn't granted to everybody, though. The route to the top is only available between 6 in the morning and 6 at night, and there's a charge of approximately $5 for access. The castle has stood here since 1441, with the most notable incidents in its history being its capture by Toyotomi Hideyoshi in 1577, and its use as a base by enemies of the Tokugawa clan during the Battle of Sekigahara. Since then, it's been abandoned, and is better known for its beautiful flora than its staging of bloody battles. It's far beyond us to say whether or not ghosts are real. If you want to believe in the supernatural, that's up to you. We do know of an abandoned location where ghosts are supposed to come out and play after dark, though, and it's India's Bhangarh Fort. There are so many stories and superstitions about ghostly activity at this fort that entry is now prohibited after the sun goes down. The fort was built during the 17th century and used to host a whole town's worth of people, but the occupants became so afraid of the alleged ghosts that they abandoned it and built a new town a short distance away from it. The stories about the haunting are colorful. One of them speaks of a wizard who cursed the fort with his final breath after he was fatally wounded by a woman he'd attempted to heal. The gates, temples, and palaces of the old fort stand silently, and tourists still visit during daylight hours, but you're unlikely to catch anyone from the surrounding area in there. The Astan Observatory was supposed to become one of the Soviet Union's greatest assets when it came to stargazing, but the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 left it without a clear owner or purpose. The observatory was built in 1991 some 50 miles away from Almaty in Kazakhstan, and was a cutting-edge scientific tool for its era. The location couldn't be more perfect for an instrument like a telescope. It's high above sea level, on a plateau, and far removed from any light pollution. By 1991, the site consisted of 2 telescope towers, a 3rd telescope, and a hotel facility for the astronomers who worked on them. A new ATZ-20 reflector telescope was due to be added to the site in the early 1990s, but the dissolution of the USSR meant that work had to be suspended, and the site was partially abandoned. It stayed that way for many years, but there have been signs of work resuming at the site since 2016. It may still be classed as abandoned, but it might not stay that way for much longer. Many years ago, the National Gas Turbine establishment in Pystock, England, was the country's main location for the creation of jet and gas turbine engines. It was at this site that the engines of the famous supersonic Concorde plane were designed, built, and tested. It wasn't always that way, though. Before 1949, it was a humble golf course, but it was chosen for the creation of the site because of its well-hidden woodland location, allowing the engineers to work out of the sight and sound of nearby residents and foreign spies. During its peak years, it was the largest factory of its type on the planet and worked on engines for the Harrier, Tornado, and V-bomber planes, as well as the aforementioned Concorde. After 50 years, though, the facility was showing its age, and with so much engine development and manufacturing work exported to the European continent, it no longer had a clearly definable purpose. The doors were locked for the final time in the year 2000, and they've never been opened to the public again since. Depending on who you choose to believe, there might be a dark secret hiding at the heart of Disney's Discovery Island. There has to be some reason why the company shut the location down without ever giving a reason and keeping it off limits, even to this day. The initial shutdown happened 20 years ago, and unusually for Disney, they've made no attempt to repurpose the island or reopen it again since. They seem to be happy to leave it there to rot, allowing nature to overrun it. We only have photographs of it in its current state because a few urban explorers have managed to gain access illegally and then release pictures to the internet. They show a decaying facility with a battered loading dock and broken snack bars. The original purpose of Discovery Island was to showcase the collection of exotic birds and plants that Disney had managed to assemble over the years. But that job went to Animal Kingdom after it opened in 1999. Because Disney is so determined to keep people away from the island, the internet is full of rumors about the reasons why, ranging from the grisly to the ghostly. We'll let you look them up. The ruins of the Kelasuri Wall in Abkhazia, Georgia, are so mysterious that nobody can agree on when they were built or by who. Some researchers say they're thousands of years old, while others claim they might have been erected as recently as the 17th century. This wall would once have featured 300 or more towers, but only a few of them are still visible. The rest have either been mostly or totally destroyed. While it might be known to the locals as the Great Abkhazian Wall, it's sadly looking a long way from being great here in the 2020s. In places along its long stretch, there are gaps in its construction, with gorges and slopes used as part of the fortifications. Swiss traveler and writer Frédéric Dubois de Montperot was one of the first knowledgeable experts to examine the wall during the 19th century, and he believed it had been built by the ancient Greeks to protect Dioscurius, but he was mistaken about Dioscurius' location. Mikhail Ivanchenko's theory is that Byzantines built it during the 4th century. Local historian Yuri Voronov prefers to believe that the Prince of Mingrelia built the walls to keep his fiefdom safe from marauding Abkhazians in the 17th century. Nobody knows for sure, but it's all definitely abandoned now. As reputations go, we think that Houska Castle in Blachta, Czechia, has one of the most foreboding in the world. It's said that when it was built during medieval times, its architects made the mistake of placing it directly on top of a portal that leads directly to hell. Sometimes, so the legends say, the demons trapped below it would escape into the real world and terrorize the residents. Perhaps it's no wonder that it's abandoned now, if all of that was going on centuries ago. Even the purpose of building the 13th century Gothic castle isn't clear. There's no water nearby, the location isn't, and was never strategically significant, and there are no signs of anyone royal or noble ever living here. It's like someone just casually dropped a castle onto the land out of nowhere and for no reason. It doesn't help matters that the castle was briefly occupied by Nazi soldiers during the Second World War, and so its reputation for evil has intensified further over the past century. These days, it's open to tourists, and those tourists are welcome to walk into the building's chapel, Tread carefully, though. It's said that the pit that leads into hell is directly below the chapel's floor. The idea of something being built on cursed Indian burial ground in the United States of America is an old cliché that's been told over and over again on television and in movies. But it doesn't ever happen in the real world. Or does it? The Lake Shawnee Amusement Park genuinely was built on Native American burial grounds in West Virginia in 1926, and there are plenty of people living in Mercer County today who will tell you that it's both cursed and haunted. We can't verify either claim, but we can certainly confirm that it's been abandoned. Nothing seemed untoward at the park for 40 years after it opened, but a child was fatally injured in an accident in the early 1960s. Shortly followed by the drowning of another child in the swimming pond. That was enough to prompt the authorities to step in, and the park was shut forever in 1966. The Ferris wheel is still standing, rusting away, and paranormal investigators claim to have footage of the decaying swings moving on their own, despite being empty. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about Castle Mont Rouge, the long-forgotten fairy tale castle hiding in Rouge in North Carolina, is that the whole structure was built by one man. This was supposed to be a dream home for artist and sculptor Robert Mihaly and his family, but he never got to realize his grand vision. He wanted a place where he could work in a grand studio in peace and spend quality time with his loved ones. Unfortunately for him, his loved ones had other ideas. His wife divorced him when the castle was only half built, and poor Robert's dream was over. He never got to complete his artistic plan for the castle's interior, but several other artists have stepped in since he walked away from it. Unfortunately, most of them were low-skilled graffiti artists, and so the place now looks a little shabby. Also, the wood that Robert used in the building process wasn't coated or treated properly, and so it's rotting away. There are rumors that you'll still find Mihaly there, occasionally inside the studio, which is the one part of the castle that he did finish. But nobody's ever supplied any evidence. Europe is a continent full of culture and history. Dig into the ground far enough in any European country, and you're likely to find traces of the Roman Empire or the ancient Greeks. England was once occupied by the Romans, but not everything beneath the country streets is Roman in origin. When archaeologist Nigel Wills-Brown was performing an exploratory dig in Liverpool in 2016 in a basement, he was astonished when he broke through into a secret tunnel full of abandoned classic cars. A little research revealed that the forgotten tunnel was built for a local railway in 1896, but closed in 1956 due to disuse. Officially, it's been off-limits since then, but someone appears to have gained access during the 1970s to store a collection of cars, and then never come back to reclaim them. While they're a little dirty and dusty from their decades in the dark, the majority of them would still be in drivable condition with just a little attention from a mechanic. The mystery of who put them down there in the first place may never be solved. You never know what you might find when you go out walking in the woods. As an example, if your walk happens in the woods of Whistler, British Columbia, Canada, you might find a train wreck in the middle of a clearing, with no apparent sign of how it got there. The Whistler train wreck has been lying on the floor of the woodland in Whistler for so long that it's become a local landmark. The crash that deposited the wreck here happened in 1956 when an overloaded train came down the tracks well above the maximum speed limit and derailed. The engine stayed on the track, but the cars plunged into the overgrowth. Because they weren't posing a major hazard to anyone, they were left, and that's where they've been ever since. The abandoned carriages have attracted several layers of paint since then from local graffiti artists, but as the wreck is technically in government land, anyone who goes to see it is technically breaking the law. Don't say we didn't warn you. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you soon.